thank you all. Welcome. Nkwandena Matachu. Welcome. We're very happy to have everyone here today joining us. We're really looking forward to both the panelist presentations as well as the discussion that we know will be really rich following each of our panelists. And as we begin our panel now on the theme of preserving Ethiopia's literary heritage, we want to take a moment to acknowledge the absence of one of the individuals who devoted his life to preserving this heritage. I'm speaking, of course, about Professor Getachew Haile, who passed away on June 10th, and who we had expected to be among us today. While I did not personally have the pleasure of meeting him in person, I know that many or even most of you did and will be feeling a sense of loss here today, and will probably feel that sense of loss at the gatherings of Ethiopian studies community, in the future as well. And this is a field that he has been a presence in for longer than many of us have been alive. His many accomplishments have already been recounted in the media numerous times over since his passing, most notably as the first African to receive a MacArthur Fellowship and become a member of the British Academy, his Edward Ullendorf Medal, and so many more. Indeed, we could hold a conference that just focused on his life's work. He was a fatherly figure to many of us in the Ethiopian studies community, who was always generous with his time and advice for the next generation of scholars. And he was also known as a quick adopter of the latest technology to further both publishing and manuscript preservation. And I know many of us will miss his warmth, his smile, and we will carry on in his spirit as we seek new and better ways to ensure that Ethiopia's written heritage lives on, unfettered, both offline and on. So in Professor Getachew's honor, we thought it would be appropriate to start our moment with a moment of silence.
I'm going to ask it on my job to get the money to pay for that. That's what you know. So I'll have like I want to help this country, meaning I want to help this specific. Oh, I already told Daddy that.
Okay, so I just want to say that it's my great honor and privilege today to present to you this panel of speakers who are really at the forefront of work to ensure that Ethiopian and Eritrean languages and literature have a home in the digital sphere. As I know many others in our audience are as well. And on a personal note, each of the speakers today has really played a role in my own journey as a historian of the digital history of Ethiopian and Eritrean languages. And I really want to just personally thank Daniel Jakob and Dr. Marta and Dr. Solomon for the support they've given me as an emerging scholar working on my PhD dissertation. And I'm really excited to be able to now be in a role of a moderator and host, kind of sharing, being a small conduit to share their really amazing work with a wider community today. And I think it's important to acknowledge that the work of each of these panelists is important not only for the preservation of literary heritage, but also for the ongoing vitality of the languages, knowledge, and cultures of this region. And it's also important for people, for us and for others, for the authors, the scribes, the religious and community leaders, and the speakers of these languages, as well as those of us who use these texts in our daily lives, who study them, who learn from them, and who benefit from communication with loved ones in mother tongues. And I would also like to make a point of noting the amazing expertise we have in our audience today. We look forward to a rich discussion a brief discussion after each of our panels present, as well as a longer, more free-form conversation at the close of this event. So with no further ado, I would like to briefly introduce each of our panelists, as well as the order of events today. And again, feel free to use the chat for questions at any point, which as a moderator, I'll make sure we return to those at the close of each presentation. So first today, looking at our participants here, today we had hoped to hear from Abba Bisra Ata'ab Getachew, who is a priest in the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church and who has rich experience with church manuscripts, including digitization projects in partnership with churches and monasteries throughout the country of Ethiopia. He currently works at the National Archive and Library Agency, cataloging Ethiopian literature and manuscripts. Unfortunately, he was unable to join us today due to a death in the family, and so we're sorry he wasn't able to join us, and we have invited him to participate in a future iteration of this event, of this series, so perhaps you will hear from him at a future date. Let's see. Okay, I also have a note there's a chance that at some point in the presentations today, we will hear from someone from NALA, from the National Archive and Library Agency of Ethiopia, but I don't see anyone, unless please speak up if you work at NALA and you would like to say a few words about NALA, we'd love to hear from you. But in the absence of that, I'm gonna move on. There is a chance that we may hear from Dr. Johannes Adige Galau, who is director of the Academy of Ethiopian Languages and Cultures. And I spoke with him about this presentation. He wasn't able to actually present today, but he was very keen on connecting with this community, and really he wanted people to know that the Academy of Ethiopian Languages and Cultures is very interested and open to international partnerships, and had the idea that perhaps this topic might be fodder for an international conference down the road that they could help organize. So in case he pops in today, he may speak a little bit more about their work there. But in the absence, I thought I'd just say a few words on his behalf. So now for our panelists. First we have, I think first we're gonna hear from Daniel Jakob, who is the founder of the Ge'ez Frontier Foundation and has led countless projects to support Ethiopian and Eritrean languages in the digital sphere, including efforts to identify all the Ethiopic characters used by Ethiopian and Eritrean languages written in the Ethiopic script, free downloadable keyboards to make typing in these languages easy, fonts that include all identified Ethiopic characters, formatting standards for Amharic. Some of this you're going to hear about today. Some of this is work in progress. He's worked on a number of Unicode proposals for the Ethiopic script, and many more projects that many I'm aware of, many I'm sure I am not aware of. And he has just devoted an immense amount of his time on this earth to working towards digital access for Ethiopian and Eritrean language speakers, and has also been a really generous contributor and mentor to a wide community of people working on many of the areas of interest that we're going to be speaking to today. So we very much look forward to hearing from him. Now we have, next we'll have Dr. Solomon Tefera Abate and Dr. Marta Yefru Tachbelai, who are assistant professors at the Addis Ababa University School of Information Science. And they are researchers working at the forefront of natural language processing, or NLP for short, to support Ethiopian languages. And recently they carried out research as experienced research fellows at the Cognitive Systems Lab at the University of Bremen in Germany. And even more recently have returned home to Addis Ababa with the Alexander Van Humboldt Foundation Return Fellowship. Their areas of research have included building parallel corpora for bidirectional statistical machine translation, multilingual acoustic and language modeling for Ethio-Semitic languages, English Ethiopian languages, statistic machine translation, and automatic speech recognition for 4 Ethiopian languages. So with that, I will hand over, oh, actually one more thing. So I think our order of events today is that we're going to hear from Daniel Jakob with his ElReq presentation for about 20 minutes, followed by a 5-minute discussion. And then we'll hear from Dr. Marta and Dr. Solomon with their presentation for 20 minutes on the state of NLP, for Ethiopian languages, followed by a 5-minute discussion. And then we're going to turn back to Daniel Jakob for a presentation on his EMUFI font project with a discussion. And then we're going to open it up to a wider Q&A and free discussion. We very much look forward to hearing from you, our presenters. Daniel, your turn.
Okay, thank you, Isabel. Let's see, so going into screen sharing. Let's see, I need the host to grant me access to share.
Okay.
And I guess while waiting, it's yeah, great pleasure to be amongst friends and colleagues again, many who I haven't seen in ages. So it's really terrific. So hi everyone. Hope we catch up soon. Okay. Yeah, still getting the host has disabled pop-up.
Okay, just a minute.
Yeah, it's great we can do this.
The only thing I can see is to make you host.
Really? Oh.
Yeah,
okay. If that's
will
what
that
it
be
takes.
okay?
Yeah, I get that pop-up that I can't share.
Okay.
Okay, now I've got an option. So it begins. All right, and let's see, I guess these are coming in at just about 20 minutes. So it's helpful if I have reminders. Okay, so the first presentation of this Ethiopic language enablement at the World Wide Web Consortium. Start with a, sorry, jumped ahead unexpectedly. We'll start with what is the World Wide Web Consortium? Hopefully most people have heard of it. You've certainly used their standards if you're not aware of who the W3C is, as they're more generally referred to as. So the W3C is the organization that's behind the family of standards that help drive the World Wide Web, that allow for communication across the World Wide Web. With this, and this ensures that what I see on my computer will be the same as what you see on your computer anywhere else around the world. And the best known standards, of course, HTML, XML, and so on. So within the W3C, they have an internationalization working group. And within this working group, they started a number of layout requirements task force. And you can see they're kind of script oriented around the needs of particular scripts, and then within the level of script language for language specific needs. And we'll see a few cases of that. So they realized before long that there's more to supporting the writing traditions of a community, of a culture than just layout. So they've kind of revamped themselves to be more about language enablement is their new theme. And I'll just read from the webpage what this speaks to. So it's the W3C needs to make sure that the world's text layout and typographic needs of scripts and languages are built into technologies such as HTML, CSS, SVG, so that web pages and ebooks can look and behave as people expect around the world. To that end, we have experts in various parts of the world explaining requirements and also documenting gaps between what is needed and what is currently supported in browsers and ebook readers. So the heart of the work that goes on with ElReq is really identifying these gaps in what technology cannot do with presenting Ethiopic literature, and then trying to form a set of recommendations for what should be done through consulting experts. So ElReq is, I'll invariably use the term ElReq out of habit. It is short for Ethiopic Layout Requirements Task Force, the original name. And its goal is to describe these requirements that address this gap for layout and presentation of documents in Ethiopic script that may be general purpose language agnostic that apply to all languages using the script, and then language specific requirements, which we'll look at a few examples of. And then to document these, validate them going through community experts, publishers, writing associations, and so on. Before going a little bit further, I want to distinguish a few things, a little bit of terminology here. So layout versus formatting versus style, it's useful to define what these are, to distinguish them, and then we can forget about it. It's not always important I want to make sure we have a common understanding. So with layout, it is the geometric arrangement of content on a page. So it asks the question, how must software be able to place an oriented text on a page? Formatting is the visual appearance of text. Once laid out, once placed on the page, what should this text look like? What capabilities are necessary? So for example, bold, italic, red, superscript, font size justification are capabilities you need to present text. And then style is the use of format under a context. So given these capabilities, how do you use it in a particular circumstance or scenario, such as a title, a chapter heading, subheading, regular text, text and table are all styles that make use of these formatting capabilities. But style is also can be a confusing term because it's used, styles can also be about the language used to form prose, such as you'd find in a style guide that tells you how to use language properly, how to express something great in composition, so about a good grammar. And that is out of scope for us. So we do not address style at this level, at this linguistic level. That's better left to style guides, something like the Chicago Manual of Style or something the Ethiopian Writers Association would come up with. But then also a style can refer to rules surrounding the use of punctuation, such as when do you use a comma in a sentence? Should you have one or two spaces after a period? These are things that software can help you out with. Software can catch this misuse and highlight it for you through means that you know the underlines and such, which is harder to do with instructing you how to form prose. So the rules surrounding punctuation will be in scope. Yes, how to use format in a particular context is in scope. Let's see, but it does become difficult to distinguish format from style, so they get used interchangeably, and we're just not going to worry about it for the purpose of this presentation. It's just a little too fussy. So with layout, with Ethiopic layout, there really were not many big issues. What software was already able to do seemed to be sufficient. It helps that the Ethiopic writing direction is left to right, which follows what happens in the West, and computers were oriented for this versus, say, with Arabic and Hebrew, right to left introduces some layout complications, as does AsianScript. When you go top to bottom, right to left, it's more and more complicated. But with respect to layout as arranging text upon a page, geometrically, computers seem to be ready for it. And what I'm showing here is the 1-2-4 and a margin style that's used in many Ethiopian manuscripts. That's fairly well known. Beyond this, columns happen, text may be 2 or 3 columns, but no real difficulties. And we see this applied in the Degwa. This is a sample from the British Library. There's some additional marginalia, but no real difficulties. The concept of a margin is pretty universal. You may not want to use the same margins in an ebook or a tablet as you would in print. If we zoom in now to the Degwa, we do find something that is culturally unique. And that's with the Zema layout, presenting the multiple rows, the multiple modes of the Millikit, the context that they can be in during chanting. This is very specialized. It represents, unfortunately, just a small, minuscule part of publishing that goes on. And we thought this, trying to address this under the scope of ElReq would be just too demanding for the time, the volunteer time people had available. And so it is not in scope. Rather, a separate group was started to address annotation in general. It turns out that this as a type of annotation, that annotation is not well represented by standards within the World Wide Web, and this impacts many communities. In particular, Bible studies, annotation can get very complex as well. So a separate group is handling this. Oops, go on. And the focus is in modern literature, and really in the type of literature that originates digitally, that would start from a word processor or some online composition tool. because that's the bulk of what's going on and where the needs need to be met most. But then for digital literature, we look back to the print world for what defines good style. And it's in the printed literature that we find that very good style was developed, as you can see here, during the 20th century, particularly up to into the 60s. I think there are fewer parties involved. They took more care, and layout formatting was done very, very well. So this is a model for what should happen electronically, what we want to be able to capture, be able to reproduce electronically. So not so much manuscripts, but the old printed media. One of the big issues, the things that worked really well in the printed world, but not so much electronically, is justification. And we can see here examples that a full justification, it can be readily achieved, easily achieved with movable type when Hulet-Nateb is in use. And as we get into style, we did find that we really need two kind of style guides for both with and without Hulet-Nateb. But here we see a centered style of Hulet-Nateb in a justified text. Another style places it on the left as if it were the last character of a word and justifies it. And there really is no space symbol inserted here. It's not there. It's just the white space is stretched to pad out the available space, which I'm going to avoid talking about more. But this is how text does get reproduced, often with the insertion of space, which is unfortunate, an ASCII space mark to be able to justify, because software really cannot do this yet, as expected. How the elasticity of the space that pads punctuation works is something we need to understand better. What applies for Hulet-Nateb may be different for, as you see, Eret-Nateb. Maybe it's more stretchable on the right. But there are spacing rules, implicit spacing rules that go on here that the typesetters were cognizant of. An example of what could be done in print and what the best that Microsoft Word 2016 could handle above and below. And if you ever tried this, it's frustrating. What happens is that the Hulet-Nateb is treated as punctuation, as a fixed width punctuation. It's not stretchable as space should be, and so we have this difficulty. But if the point from this is that if you are not using Hulet-Nateb because technology did not make it easy to do so, then that's a problem. You should not be abandoning some feature of the literary legacy, some format style that you would like to have just because technology cannot handle it. We're forced to do that for maybe economic reasons. So a cultural tradition is lost when society adopts a technology that's just incapable of supporting that tradition. And why that happens is another discussion. But the goal in ElReq is now to adapt what has been adopted before these writing traditions are just lost irrevocably, until they're just forgotten and not addressed. So we want to address this before it's too late. So from the 20th century corpus, there's a lot of just beautifully laid out and formatted literature to go through that looks like great examples, but corpus can be misleading. So when you dive into it deeper, you find that maybe it's not so consistent as you would hope it to be. What we see here is in this punctuation sequence as a style aspect, the flow of Hulet-Nateb, close quotation mark, question marks outside of the quotation, but then a few lines away, the question mark is within the closing quotation mark, and following Hulet-Nateb, which not every author will do. In some works, question mark will not follow Hulet-Nateb, it'll replace it. And for whatever reasons that frustrate me, there's no opening quotation mark. So that's unfortunate in this case, but very common. With exclamation point, another example of some irregularity that can appear, we see two exclamation points following a word. That's fine. And now Hulet-Nateb follows exclamation points. This is a work from 1960. Then one line away, Huletnitib proceeds, exclamation point. So so three ways to go about it already. And then Aratnitib is apparently allowed to follow exclamation point. And you'll find this also with question mark, where question mark may follow Aratnitib or Huletnitib or precede it. They both can be used together. So and that's probably not really what we want. It's probably not a best practice that a group like the Ethiopian Writers Association would recommend. So we want to know really what should this be going forward? What is the best practice that we should apply or have want to encode for software so it can do it when we're careless. So I'll get off justification now after pointing out that it applies to numerals also. Justification numerals across lines, say in a table of contents, is important. In tables also, what's the right way to line the orders of value here? So and maybe all these ways of going about alignment are fine. The order of magnitude style, the left justification, right justification, maybe all these should be available and the author chooses. But then the question is, what should be the default if that the software would do automatically? So this comes from a best practice. Ordered lists is another topic. Fortunately, alphabetic ordered lists are defined in W3C already, but need review. And here's where we get into a problem that can be language specific. So in ordering that makes sense for Amharic, maybe would not make sense in modern Tigrinya Eritrean, Eritrean Tigrinya, where you drop some of the older Giz letters. And if you're in a Giz language document, the Amharic letters will look out of place. So sometimes you do not want the old or the new letters, depending on the language of the document. And that needs to be tracked. The software needs to be aware of it so it doesn't appear automatically. If you get into an Abagada list, some authors do want this, but then should it only have the Giz inventory, or should it also have Amharic and Tigrinya? You'll find samples of both. This is a frustrating point. For every example of a practice you can find in corpus, you'll find plenty of counterexamples. And so expert input is needed. What happens after pa? Do you go in a halahama list? Does it become huluhumu? Do you treat it like a numeral system? These are decisions to be made. The marker, just some more examples. Many markers can be used after that counter, as it's called. Authors have their own preference, that's fine. It's nice to have options. Software can offer options, but again, how many options are needed and what should the default be for a given language using Ethiopic script? Alignment is an issue. It's more of a layout issue. I'm going to, just in the interest of time, skip over that. How text follows the end of a list is an interesting question in the Ethiopic practices. You'll find the following paragraph after a list may occur on on another line, or it may just flow directly from the end of the last item. And other languages don't do that. Other practices do not do that. Underline is a style that you will find in use in early 20th century, late 19th century. And their use of underline, when you find it in old works, may be limited by the technology that they had at their disposal and may not have been using it really in the way they wanted to. So questions here is, how thick should the underline be? How far below the baseline should that be? Is it fixed? Should it be proportional to the font in use, the thickness of the strokes? All questions to consider. Superscripts, when you type, there's these auto-complete features that are nice to have. If you type ST after number, it will automatically superscript in English. What is the Amharic inventory for this? Inyao might be Sa for Sun Team has been used. People may or may not want that with Giz. And then with superscripting, just how high should these numbers be raised? Should it be to the top of a letter at a fixed level that's always the same, or should it float around and just be at the top of a given letter? So fixed height, a universal height or a variable height, depending on the letter, what's best? Numerals, if you've worked with the Nyala font in Microsoft Word, you'll notice that when you form an Ethiopic numeral sequence, that the numerals will combine together. The upper and lower numeral bars will automatically join, which is nice if that's what you want. But the question is, should that always be happening? Should that really be the default, or should it be an option that you choose when you want it? Or would it be the default perhaps in a given context? And what are those contexts? We see it here with the Abyssinica font, which is something recent. Citation came up in the last meeting. Citation is very important. You'll find lots of variations on it. And part of that's because there's lots of media to cite, lots of different types of media where the style has to be a little different. But settling on a style, defining a set of ways to do citation, and then encoding it in a way that a computer can understand, so a computer can do it, software can do this automatically for us, is something that's within the scope of this work. And there's a lot. I would love to get into minutia and spend the next 4 hours talking about all this. If you're a copy editor, this is this sort of thing you live for. But about the project, so it really started accidentally at the Unicode Consortium under the topic of justification, which is why I spend so much time on it. And Unicode Consortium decided this is out of scope for them. They weren't going to change Haletnatev to be treated as a space symbol. It was going to have to remain punctuation, and the issue would have to be addressed by the W3C. And that's how this got started, 2015, 2016. And from that, it's moves along, well, honestly, rather slowly, but as people have available time, a significant work product has been the development of a survey where the thrust of ElReq was not to answer any questions, but to identify the questions that need to be asked, the questions where we need to get answers from experts, from the publishing community, from authors and writers, the Writers Association. So those questions were researched. They're put into a survey. And then we found that the survey was really hard for people to understand and respond to correctly or accurately, in part because the terminology, the language of layout and formatting as used by software people is very domain specific. It's very esoteric and did not translate well. It was confusing for what was really meant. And coming out of that experience was this recommendation also by our test surveyors and translators that it's better to really just have a style guide that says this is what it is and have people react to it. So given a style guide that says these are the way things should be, people can better understand that with examples and then say, no, that's wrong. That's not the way it should be. We'll get better responses that way, corrective responses. So the style guide has been in development, and I like to think it'll be done in July. It's been, again, the product of available time, but it's been started, modeled after the Chicago Manual of Style, but not including the language-specific parts about prose, about good prose. Anyway, how you can participate? You just need to have a problem. Try to format something. Try to do some layout and find that you're unable to do it. If you're not able to use your software or typesetting technology to format things in the way you want, well, let us know. Let us know about the problem. And that's all I need to do. We'll track it. We'll get it into the style guide. We'll put it before the experts and eventually get it into this recommendation that these technologies, the web browser, ebook, and word processor technologies can utilize. So just communicate the problem. That's the minimal thing to do. If you're really into copy editing and these topics, there's a mail address. There's the ElReq website that has the inventory of questions, really, and then the start of a style guide and the gap analysis page. So I'm going to, I think I've lost track of time. No one's tried to shut me down. So I'm ending here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, I made the decision to let you go. I mean, you're maybe a minute or two over, but since we didn't have Abba Bisra Atab's presentation, I think I want to give you the full time. So
Okay.
feel comfortable with your next presentation as well. I think we're
Okay,
going to be fine on time.
I do see
So
a note that some people are in the waiting room.
Oh, okay.
I guess I'm the host. Maybe I have to do that now. Sorry.
I suppose so. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
think
Or I
so.
should end being host. So how do I do that?
You
think you
just make somebody else a host.
Oh, okay. Okay. Right. Okay.
Or just press participants and you'll see who's going to be admitted.
Yeah.
At the bottom, you see participants and you'll see.
Okay. Thanks. I know this better from other of these tools, but
Yeah.
Oh, 1, 2. I guess some people disconnected and tried to get. Oh well. So I guess you're still seeing my screen, and looking for where are you, Charles? Okay, you can see how clumsy I am with this. I'm glad
That's
to
okay.
take my hands off it. Okay. Well, thank you, people.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, great. So I think we can open it up if there's questions or comments. Anybody would like to join the ElReq effort, or if you have another kind of issue, for example, that you'd like to highlight for Daniel, things, as he said in his last slide, if there's things that you'd like to do with your digital publishing that you can't do because the software doesn't allow it, then that's exactly what the ElReq committee would like to know about. So I'll open it up here for anyone to comment. Feel free to unmute yourself and just speak, or you can add a question to the chat and I'll share it with the group.
Mine is not a question. I just like to recognize Daniel. Just he always amazes me how thoroughly he's been working for years on this kind of details, that nobody is picking up, and just want to recognize and say thank you, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Unfortunately, fortunately, I enjoy it. It's a what do you say, work of love, or?
I've got a quick question. Daniel, you mentioned that the style guide or the citation style would be based on Chicago, but are there plans? No?
Oh, not quite. No, the style guide is based on the Chicago Manual of Style as a model. So the topics covered there are covered in the Ethiopic Layout Style Guide. But citation specifically, no. There was a work by, if I can remember his name, Derece Gebri, I think, did an early book of Amharic style. And I think we started with his citation format. Derece Gebri was the head of the Ethiopian Writers Association. I think that's maybe hasn't been for the last 10 years, but he did maybe one of the only books on Amharic style. Something like a Strunkton White for Amharic is what he did. And so his work has been a great reference for us. And so yeah, based on that, but it covers, say, books. And now with modern media, you have to be able to cite videos and TikToks and whatever else is going on,
But specifically with regard to citations, would it be possible to pattern those after MLA and APA as well, to have different flavors of citation styles? Or is it better just to stick to a specific Ethiopic?
Well, yeah, this touches into the difficulties we had with the survey, trying to ask people what do they want, what should be done, and giving them multiple choice questions or fill in the blank. It was difficult for people to respond to that, but I think it would be good if we started with, say, MLA, kind of mapped it onto Amharic, following what the mapping from MLA style that Derece Gebri has applied already, following that pattern and presenting that and seeing how people react. So the Ethiopian Writers Association could review it and say, yeah, yes, this looks good, or that's almost right, but change this here and there. But you need somewhere to start. You have to start with something. And so MLA would be good for that. I'm not, MLA versus APA and Chicago, they're all competing styles. But right, that's the important thing, is to start somewhere, let people react to that, and then you'll start to get the answers that you want. Or hope for need to then encode into systems.
Yeah.
That's my take on it.
Thank you.
And
Other
we
questions
didn't
or
invite
comments?
some EWA people, Ethiopian Writers Association people here today, but it looks like they haven't been able to make it. So hopefully we'll be in touch with them again soon.
Any other questions or comments for Daniel? Mhm. Okay, so in that case, I think we're going to move to Dr. Marta and Dr. Solomon's presentation. I'm not seeing them on our participant list at the moment. Wonder if they have
I did
lost
see them a few
internet.
moments ago.
They were here a few minutes ago, yes.
Yeah.
Maybe they had to attend to something else, or maybe they have lost internet temporarily. Daniel, how would you feel about doing your EMUFI presentation?
Okay. Sure. Yeah.
You thought you were going to get a break, but unfortunately,
Yeah. Well, we could all do a 5-minute break and come back.
we could.
I
Would
could-
we take a 5-minute break? We could do that.
Take a
Let's
deep
do that.
breath.
So let's meet
Yeah.
back. Let's meet back at 55 after the hour. So
Okay.
5 minutes.
Okay, works for me.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, Solomon and Arthur are here.
Oh,
They're
Okay,
here.
perfect.
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
timing.
Okay, perfect. So in that case, Solomon and Marta, welcome back. We were going to take a 5-minute break, but we have decided that, oh, there you are. Okay, perfect. But since you're back, we're going to go ahead and let you present, and then, yes. So feel free to share your screen, or if you have slides. I know if you, I think you did have slides, I believe. So anyway, take it away.
Yeah, can you make us host so that we can share our slide?
Yes.
Or maybe the share could or need to be multiple share.
Co-host. Or,
I see. Yes. So Charles, I think will handle that.
I've made you host.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay. I think maybe if there is any interruption due to our connections, we have to ask apologies beforehand.
Yeah.
And we will try to finish a very brief discussion points on the area of natural language processing, especially natural language processing for Ethiopian languages.
You know, Dr. Solomon, I might suggest that you turn your video
And,
off. It might
I see
help.
from the names, I think, yeah, that would be
Dr.
better.
Solomon, I'm sorry to interrupt. Your connection is a little, like the audio is a little bit breaking up. And I think perhaps if you turn your video off, it might help us to hear you better.
Yeah. And how about now?
I think that's better. Let's try that.
And it's not as big as what you see in the outline, because almost all the topics that you see on the outline are just one slide in the presentation, and it is kind of bringing points into attention of the audience for the purpose of discussion. And therefore we will say, I would say, actually I have been given the chance to present the points here. I would say few introduction on what natural language processing is and the different levels of language analysis, from not the details of the linguistic analysis, but from the point of view of natural language processing. And we will see few tasks that we are to do in the development of natural language processing. And in developing those tasks, we follow different approaches. I would say something on that. And we have conducted, as Ethiopians and our colleagues from different countries in the world, different research on natural language processing for Ethiopian languages. And we have also seen on the web that there are some tools that would be helpful for Ethiopian languages in helping the natural language processing application usabilities. And we try to connect our discussion to today's topic by looking at what natural language processing would help in information services use. And we will mention some challenges of developing natural language processing. Just as an introduction, I think we all know that natural language processing is mostly said, especially these days, to make it more broader, human language technology that encapsulates all the technologies that enable us to communicate with computers in our own languages. And also it is said computer speech and language processing to include the speech processing part. Computational linguistics is also when we search on Google or on the web, but all of them are the areas of researching and developing tools to enable computers and humans communicate in the human languages. In doing that, our goal is to enable computers perform useful tasks or to enable computers understand human in the human languages, not in the programming languages or any scripting languages. And for that, or in doing that, what the computers would do, or if we can make them understand languages, they would help us improve human communication. For example, automatic machine translation is there to mediate any or to break any barrier that exists between different language speakers. And also they would do useful processing tasks in our text processing or speech processing. What Daniel was mentioning, the computers are to help us generate documents. And in that, we have different tools, natural language processing tools. One is spelling checker, spelling corrector, and that requires, of course, all those standards that Daniel was presenting for us. And grammar checker is also a very important tool, but which we need to develop to exist or to help us in the use of the computers. The computers also would enable human-machine communication if they are empowered by natural language processing. For example, we can use our speech as an input, which actually we prefer to use instead of the keyboard, especially when we consider all the difficulties of typing in the Ethiopic scripts. Although the Unicode, thanks to Daniel and the whole team that brought Unicode for our scripts, but still there are difficulties to use them as an input because we don't have standard keyboards and they are very difficult. As an output tools also, we want to hear the computers speak to us. But for that, we need to develop tools like speech synthesis, and we need to have the hidden or the back end capacities of the computers to generate language in our syntactic senses or in the proper sentence formats or structures that we understand. For that, natural language processing is to be developed and to be implemented in the computer. In doing all the natural language processing, we actually borrow the divide and conquer strategies from the linguists, and they analyze languages at different levels, because language is a very complicated and a very dynamic human behavior, I would say. And therefore, in dividing the big problem into small problems, we take the first level. Actually, it is taken as a first level because it is in a way language independent when we take phonetics, and it becomes language dependent when we consider the linguistic analysis of speech especially. And that is phonetics and phonology. We have different features that we are to extract or get from the language to develop the different speech processing models and tools. And we go on working on morphology to get meaning out of whatever is represented in a text format or in a speech format. And unless we know the morphological sequences, the morphological sets of the language, we cannot really analyze the meaning of especially words. Because in words, we have syntax, morphosyntax, that are to be handled or understood in the process of the morphology. And when we put the morphology or the words or that are formed in the morphological processes together, we are to understand the syntactic structure of a language, and the computers need to understand that and analyze that syntactic structure of the language, which called syntax, and a number of tools or NLP tasks are to be developed in this level. And the difficulty goes on when, or grows or becomes more complicated when we consider semantics, especially when we want to translate or when we want to extract meaning from any text or any speech. We have to have the knowledge of the semantics of a language, and that is another level of language analysis. And when we move on to the pragmatics, the difficulty becomes more and very complicated, because we are to consider the environment, the know you ask. Charles, we see you, but we are not sure whether our audio is in.
The audio is cutting out quite a bit.
This slide or?
The audio is gone for a bit there. Can I have you make Isabel the co-host or the host?
Okay.
Just in case. You can continue with the audio as much as possible, but.
Okay.
Okay. I think here what we have been trying to discuss or point out is we are trying to handle the big problem in the different levels of language analysis. I think leave out the discourse, which is very difficult and which we have not done much on researching in or developing any applications for Ethiopian languages. These are the list of the different tasks that we are required to do to have natural language processing helpful for a language. Actually, in Ethiopia, we have more than 80 languages, and all these tasks are to be developed for almost all of them, for each of the languages. And I don't actually bother you to see all of these lists, and we know that these are the different tasks or the different models that we are to develop, and simply to take examples from each levels. If we consider speech recognition, we have to know the different phonetic behavior or feature of a language to develop acoustic model. And the same to the TTS. In having the speech recognition, we are converting our speech into a text format. Our speech is represented in a phonetic representation, and the output text is to be represented in the text format of the language. And the reverse is the speech synthesis. Okay. Just to take some examples from the grapheme or the writing system, especially what Daniel was mentioning, we are to do OCR to convert the printed format into a digital format, but all those writing systems are to be standard way to have a tool that we call OCR, the optical character recognition. And we still do not have these tools because our writing systems are not that easy to develop the OCR system. And the morphological processing, is of the important part on the morphological level, because we need to understand the different formats of the words in the morphological behavior of the language. And even when we have the different words and their morphological structures, we need to reconstruct the words to get whether they are correct in spelling, correct in syntactic role. And these are some examples that we need to develop in natural language processing. I'm just taking examples from here. And we also need to develop part of speech tagging. For example, the words do have different roles in sentences, and sentences could be understood in their sequence of part of speech tags. And even when we want to parse or understand the structure of the sentences, the very important information or linguistic information that the computer are to decide on are part of speech tags of each word. And semantically, we also need to handle the word sense disambiguation or word meaning understanding or classification of the words in their semantic roles, which we call sense disambiguation. And we are to do different tasks that are to be handled for each of the languages that we have listed here, although they are not exhaustive. And you see machine translation at the end and summarization somewhere in between. And all these tasks are some important tasks that we need to, or we want to have for our languages. Okay. I think our screen is not freezed yet. And in developing these tasks or in developing these models for the computers to learn a human language, we follow different approaches. Actually, the major ones are two. And I would say the classical or the approach that existed before the machine learning approach is the rule-based, and mainly that requires linguistic knowledge to craft the rules, the language rules for all the levels of language analysis, starting from phonetics to the discourse, which is actually very difficult. And it is difficult financially, cost-wise, and time-wise, and expertise also is very difficult to get to craft the rules. And the recent approach that is a corpus-based, or which we call, or the linguists call, corpus linguistics, help the machine to learn the human languages, or the different features of the human languages at different levels of analysis, learning from corpora. By corpora here, we mean actually can start with the raw data that we can take the text that existed in a digital format. And if we have different tools that require linguistic information, we might need some annotated data for the computers to learn different features of the language. And we can therefore use the corpora that we prepare manually annotated, or that we get just in a text format that are generated from the day-to-day computer use of the users of computers. And that could be in any script or in any writing system. And if it is a corpus-based, actually that would be easier to apply different algorithms to learn. And also cost-wise, it is a little cheaper if we have the learning algorithms. And basically, it is a corpus-based to link to what has been done recently, or what we have currently. We divide them into research and the tools, but we have a lot of research outputs which have not been actually developed to a tool level or a product level. But when we take some examples of the research that we have done, I mean the NLP community that are conducting research on Ethiopian languages, but most of them are conducted in the academic environment. Mostly by students, including ourselves. We have started research in university, and we have also colleagues who conducted their research in this area for their PhD research projects. Research, including our colleagues. We have also some projects that could be conducted or funded from the different funding or sources of funds or finances. We have universities who funded different thematic research, adaptive research, and we have also a ministry. Actually, it's no more the Mint, which still is now the excellence centers in different universities and at a national level under actually the theme of artificial intelligence. And we have also got some support from external funding institutions like Google and the ones that mentioned our support from the German institutions that enabled or helped us to conduct research in part of speech tagging, which used the different corpora, because it is first appeared in online by the language center here in Ethiopia. And we had also parallel corpora. One is developed by a student, and the other is as a thematic research supported by Addis Ababa University. And we have also corpora that has been developed by ourselves, I would say, as part of our thematic research. And using these corpora, we have also different research outputs. I mean, those corpora are also published as publications, and the tasks or the research output in the development of different models have also been published. We have different publications in the area of machine translation, including the PhD dissertations and the different conference publications. And we have different research outputs as a publication, especially in speech recognition and speech processing, including synthesis. Actually, we have PhD graduates in this area also, including ourselves, both of us. And morphological processing has also been done I would say, very well, but not yet for a number of other languages, including Wendoson's work. And part of speech tagging, I mean, using the corpora that existed, different part of speech tagging research, including our students, master's students, and ourselves have also been conducted. And at least I know 3 or 2 PhD works on optical character recognition, including Wendoson on his master's research, and 2 PhD works. I think Worku Alamu, you know, Million Meshasha, you know him, and they have conducted different research in this area. These are just examples. And we have tried to search for the different tools that would be useful. And we've got surprisingly 3 tools that I think I have seen Solomon Atnafu. He might comment on this. And I know that he has been doing also for IR tools. We couldn't maybe get online, but we could say that Ethiopian languages are now represented online on the web, having different tools. Yeah, okay. And these spelling checkers are, unfortunately, what we've got is only for one language, which is Amharic. And we have, as I've said, we have more than 80 languages, and these tools do not exist for, therefore, more than 70-something languages. And I think here I have to say thanks to Michael Gasser, who made a tool that is, I would say, useful in NLP for 3 of our languages, which he called Horn Morpho, which enables morphological segmentation, even morphological analysis, and also transcriptions of the 3 languages. And I know for Tigrinya and for Amharic it works well. And I have some comments from a PhD graduates who conducted research on Afan Oromo, which we call, actually standard name is Oromo. And it has some problems on Oromo, but it is a very useful tool for our Ethiopian languages. And Google has tried to include Ethiopian languages, but mainly Amharic. And I'm not sure how it does for Tigrinya, but for Amharic, it has some translation, but with funny translations. And sometimes we translate and end up laughing on the sentences constructed into Amharic. And we have also seen that there are attempts from the Abyssinica, and that is also one translation tool that we could use. It is something that we can start with. And same is existing also from the same website on TTS, but again, for the first language speaker of Amharic, we can hear, but we might not like to hear it so many times because it doesn't really sound natural that much. And in the information services, if we could have the different tools that we say are to develop in natural language processing, and if we can implement, make available for the public, for the information service provider, we would take machine translation as a very important tool of natural language processing, because most of the information exists in different languages, but our citizens speak other languages, and also citizens who cannot hear, and we have also citizens
I think we're having some problem with your audio again. Oh, we lost you.
I think we are reconnected now.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Solomon. Okay. If you could finish up in the next maybe 2-3 minutes, that would be perfect, Solomon.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's that actually.
Okay, I thought so, but just
Okay,
to be
language processing. Okay, the natural language processing in our interest here. And the natural language processing would help convey information citizens in the details that they would prefer to get the information. And to convert the information that exists in the different archives, different museums, the different heritage format into the digital format if we have the OCR and the different image processing tools that are to be developed as part of natural language processing. And we have different tools in the information. That's the last slide. Share.
Sorry.
It's just
for
the last slide.
That's okay.
One
You
more
could
slide.
just describe it to us if you would like.
We have also lost the host privilege.
Solomon, if you'd like, you could just describe to us your last slide since we've had a chance to look at it.
I think he's made me the host again.
Okay.
Solomon, go ahead and describe your last slide orally for us. Okay, I
I
guess
have to say, despite any technical difficulties that we're facing now, I'm actually quite pleased with how well this is going. You know, we had, as Charles and Daniel and the rest of our presenters had, you know, been organizing this, we had all feared that there might be a complete blackout or, you know, these kind of more serious problems. So these kind of minor hiccups are not a major thing. And I think we've gotten the overall the sense of Dr. Solomon and Dr. Marta's work and presentation and giving us a good introduction to the field of NLP with Ethiopian and languages also, some of which are used in Eritrea. So if they are able to come back and join us, that will be great. If not, I think we've at least had the benefit of their, you know, the bulk of their presentation. So Daniel, can you kind of get yourself ready to move into the next presentation? If they come back online, maybe we can have let them finish and have a Q&A, but otherwise,
Right.
we'll get ready for your presentation.
Okay, I'm ready, and I certainly had some questions for him. It was pretty interesting.
Okay, good. Yeah, another alternative too that we could put some questions in the chat so that if they are able to come back online, we have a record of those, and then we can take a few minutes to, you know, have some response.
Okay, let's hope they can rejoin us. Oh,
yes.
Good. Should I move into the next?
I've made you host, so feel free when you're ready.
Okay. Okay, so bringing this out again. Alrighty, so hopefully my screen is projecting.
We can see your screen, Daniel.
Not, and this will be, maybe maximize it. Okay, so EMUFI and text digitization beyond scanning. So what EMUFI is, it's the Ethiopic Manuscript Unicode Font Initiative, and it addresses a level that would not be addressed by the W3C, but is still relevant to presenting and preserving now manuscripts more so than printed material, you know, modern printed material in electronic environments. So get into it then very quickly. So I'll start with kind of the premise that when we digitize art, in particular portraits and illuminations, that being a visual language, capturing it visually is pretty sufficient. We have, as we digitize the artwork, we are digitizing the culture. We are preserving the culture for the future. And being a visual experience, we've largely done what we need to do to, you know, as much as we can do to represent the natural experience of experiencing this artwork in the natural world. So but if we were then we're only able to capture it in black and white or this monochrome form, this would not be sufficient. This is not our job is not done. We'd want to return to this later as technology caught up and then be able to capture it in color to get that full expression, that full experience. But if we were only able to capture art in black and white, what are we really losing? Well, it's kind of obvious, but then also difficult to describe or difficult to quantify in a way, particularly if you're not from the art world like myself. But obviously we're losing the full artistic expression of the artist. I can say that much, being a non-artist. Every aspect of color used to communicate that artistic vision, expression of emotion and tone and mood is going to be lost. We lose the ability to analyze the use of color, you know, from a cultural practice, the change of color over time, the differences between artists through their use of color is of course lost. And I think if all we had in the end was the black and white form, we can never really reconstruct the original color. We can get close, we can guess, but it would have to be a guess. But for a while, that was all we could do, though, when in the era of microfilm and microfiche for capturing this artistic tradition, this cultural practice. And that it was great at the time, of course. It was fantastic to have this and be able to duplicate negatives and send them around the world. That was sort of the trade-off that we had, a greater distribution with a loss of, you know, the full artistic expression. So you have, it was better than nothing. It was great. You have the qualitative part. You can read this, the text, and understand it. And you know, should the original artifact be lost to fire, to theft, damage, water damage, and so on, well, at least you still have that microfilm. It's still just better than nothing. Of course, it would not be acceptable today because technology has caught up, and we expect more. We know we can do more. And so this is our starting point. We'd accept nothing less than a full color capture of a manuscript. And that's what we have lots of now through, I think, the samples from the British Library. So it's a much richer capture of the visual information. And maybe it's complete for the illuminations. I mean, with respect to any future utilization of the illumination, there are no obstacles. You can do what you want with this image, and there's no more that you really need from it visually. You have the full experience that you would have in person, or pretty close. This analogy breaks down if we talk about something more tactile. You know, sculptures you can't capture digitally in the same way, at least not yet, or not readily. But this is great. It's great that we have this and lots of it these days. When it comes to capturing the textual part of it, though, I think we're more here. Still kind of at the level of where we left off with microfiche. It's not radically different with what we're able to do with text. And I'm thinking of once transcribed text, taking the text from the image and capturing it in a way that's bytes, editable bytes that you can copy, paste, and type. We're still sort of at this level. I take it with a grain of salt. This varies from institute to institute. Some groups stop at the visual side. Others go on to transcribe samples or try to do a full transcription through something like OCR. And beyond that, there is markup groups like the Hamburg people with the Beta Matze project will mark things up in the TEI format where you can identify named entities in here, saints and so on. You can mark them up and be able to find them later. But what you're marking up is still text, and that text that's being marked up is still itself, kind of here. Is the thrust of this. But we can do better. Well, and simply put, what the problem is, what the gap is here, it's with the missing Ethiopic symbols that are preventing us from capturing all the information that's in a given glyph once we get to that transcribed text. And this problem is independent of the mechanisms for how we got here. Sorry, I'm going to take a moment to admit people. I'll pause at this moment because we do have, it sounds like we have Dr. Solomon and Martha back.
Actually, Daniel, I'm not seeing them on the, on the participant list. They may be coming in and out if their connection is poor.
Okay, well, I'll rely, since you can see them, I'll rely on you to stop me if we want to ask some questions before they break off again.
Sure, Daniel, thanks.
Oh, okay. So yes, independent about for how we got the digitize the image into a textual form, if it was OCR or hand typed, we still have the same problem that we don't have the symbols needed to transcribe onto. And we're so used to this that we don't even think about it. We've just come to accept it, and not seeing it as a problem is itself also a problem. We've come to accept this loss. And I'll illustrate what I mean. The good news is technology has caught up now, whereby we can have everything. We can capture every nuance of this of the textual side. So I'll start with to really illustrate what I'm talking about here. I'll start with this sample from the British Library, and going to just the first column, if we were to transcribe the text from that first column, I'm calling it lossful because some of the encoded information about these symbols, the aratnateb, it's a rubricated aratnateb. We cannot transcribe that as we want. It would be a regular aratnateb. Same for Natalasaurus. Looking below, there is actually another type of rubricated aratnateb that's different from the others. That's kind of interesting to know about. And here the of Apolon is written in a different style that we might want to preserve, but cannot. But we should be able to do this. I'll refer to it as lossless. We should be able to capture all this extra information that's part of the symbol itself into the transcribed form. And going to another example from PIM, from Princeton's archive of the Miracles of Mary, a typical transcription, if you were to go about it, might appear something like this. This may be as far as we can go. But we should be able to go. We should not accept anything less than a full visual capture of the text as shown here with the rubricated aratnatebs, Natalasaurus, and the insertion mark that we saw here, which until this week, I thought it was just a two-ring Mechfel mark. Dr. James Brown, or Jeremy Brown rather, pointed out he set me right with what this really was. So it's a fancy insertion mark. And of course, the Amharic, which is very common. We want to be able to capture this Amharic. And to really be abundantly clear, this is copy and paste text. If it wasn't apparent before, this really is stuff you would type, you could copy, paste, and search for. It is typable text that we want to have here. And I'm suggesting should be a goal in transcription. Being able to utilize this capability, which by the way is thanks to emojis. Emojis brought lots of color to fonts, and now we can utilize this advancement technology to our advantage for transcription in this true to form way. But it opens up the doors to another level of problems. Is if you can capture all the rubricated full stops, what is this inventory? What do you have to be prepared for an OCR system to be able to record once detected? So there's a lot of ways to go about rubricating punctuation. And then there's additional, I'll refer to them as utility marks that you'll find in old manuscripts. This from the 13th century, a Mechfel mark, as I've been told its name is Mecharisha, which goes along with the Mechfel mark, appear here in different presentation forms of a Mechfel. Likewise, Mecharishes can be rubricated. You'll find these fairly commonly, I think, in older manuscripts. And then they have variations, a short form, a long form, other stylized forms. The spacer that's put between aratnatebs, it's almost like an Ethiopic tab symbol, is something we should be able to capture as well. And we can. These insertion marks, if error and error correction is part of your interest, we can capture the error with the utility marks. So it's a question during transcription, do you want to correct it and do the insertion upon transcription, or do you want to indicate that there was an error made in the original and present it as it was written? So the field of error marking is something unto itself. So there's a family of utility marks to be aware of. These are some I've come into, and there's many more. But all of this should be something we have at our disposal during transcription, during OCR processing of an image. Numbers are also very interesting. In this example from Genesis, we see numerals without numeral bars. Sometimes they have only the top numeral bar. Sometimes those numeral bars are joined or rubricated, as we see at the bottom. And I like to think the most interesting, and that's fairly commonplace to find numbers without the bars or with just one bar. Less common is the most interesting thing here, I think, which is a 21st number, a special form of the number 10 that gets used for values between 11 and 19. It's not always used. It would be interesting to study when it was used, and maybe it's regional, maybe it's by one school, one monastery. But you will come into this special form of the numeral 10, rubricated and non-rubricated, and with and without bars. There's a lot of numbers. There's a whole like syllabary of numbers out there that you may want, I think you would want to have if you're to do true to form transcription, a lossless transcription. You need to be aware of all these. Somehow it has to be in a font. You know, again, this is all in a font. It's all here. It's available if you'd want to use it. So this going on from numbers, there's so many of them. Ligatures. The most well-known ligature is Gazi, used in Ethiopic, which is very frequent, and it's the most used ligature across, I'll say, time and space. You'll find it through all eras, all regions. There are very many ligatures. Here's 28 that we come into. And I'll say at this point, these are some, really, I come into these while looking for something else. I never go looking for ligatures. I never go looking for punctuation. I happen upon it as I'm reading a manuscript for some other reason. And I'll say half of these ligatures, more than half these ligatures and the punctuation that I've shown come from Jonas Carlson, who like me found them in the course of doing other work, but then thought it would be useful to have available for the documents that he'll be producing as part of his PhD research. So he brought them to my attention. I was able to get them into the EMUFI font, and here they are available for use in any documents. So ligatures is another aspect of what we look for. In Zema literature, that special category we said was not part of ElReq, but was addressed through annotation, there are still symbols beyond the basic that are not yet available. Sorry, I'm going to pause to try to let people in. I don't know if that works. So if you're familiar with the Yardic corpus, there's the classic simple set of Goethe symbols, but that's really just the beginning. In corpus, you'll find many more compound forms as they get combined together, and that would be needed for properly reproducing those documents. If you're producing new material, new Yardic materials is done all the time. It's still an active calligraphic practice that lives on to this day. But it can't really be done through computers readily because of the absence of symbols. Again, with Yardic literature, you have the bait markers, whereby you have the system of abbreviation. Words are abbreviated, and then the numeral bars are applied to the abbreviations to give them context to indicate the bait number. You go to the Ankasa Haleta to look up what they mean, and it's very much a part of the practice, but something you cannot readily do today. Various symbols you find also in Yardic literature, don't really know yet what these are, would love to find out. These shapes start to get interesting because they show up again when we get to magic literature. So there's it seems to be increased. I'd say in the last 10 years, I seem to come into people studying magic literature much more so than in the past. And it has a large inventory of letter-like symbols. Now, again, if you wanted to transcribe and study further through text analytic tools, you'll be at a loss because you can't encode these symbols yet. You're left to manual processes. So I think this impedes the field of study of magic, because you cannot use data mining techniques or linguistic analysis techniques through software that's readily available. Pointing out here just a couple that of these letter shapes that were unique to magic literature, but now are actually part of Unicode by virtue of being utilized unexpectedly in Garage orthography recently. But okay, well, if you could do better transcription, lossless transcription, fully representative, true to form transcription, what do you gain? What's the advantage of doing this? I think there's some thoughts are expressed here. I think it does honor the scribe, the original artistic vision of that scribe, what he was trying to express. It's a more faithful reproduction of the original, of course. So if you want to republish on a ebook reader, a manuscript, you would need to have these symbols, where margins and text can flow and change around. Text analytic tools, the natural language processing tools, searching tools are now something you could use, which you couldn't before. If you want to search for some of those special symbols, rubricate symbols, you couldn't. If you want to analyze rubrication, it's look at why does a certain author use rubrication in certain themes of prose, you'd be able to do that. That's a field of sentiment analysis. And it might be interesting to see, where, if there's a contextual or semantic form for why these symbols get used when they do. I think paleographic studies, in the area of paleographical studies, they would now be able to use these text analytic tools more readily. They can start to use digital approaches to analyze writing, the study of writing over time and place. And on and on and on. This is just a simple listing. So that's kind of presenting the problem. And then the EMUFI, I'll won't spend much more time, but EMUFI was a project started to address this gap in what we can capture as editable text. So EMUFI gets its name from EMUFI, which is the Medieval Unicode Font Initiative. So the European medievalist, that area of study had the same problem with European manuscripts. There are lots of extra and spurious symbols that weren't available to them, say in Unicode or other standards. So they formed a community to track them, identify them, occasionally send them off to Unicode for encoding, or if Unicode doesn't want it, they manage it on their own. So that's, anyway, I'd say it started 2018. It's maybe the 5th or 6th time I've had the opportunity to present it. Just very quickly about the approach to it. And this is roughly where we are now, where the community establishes the inventory. What are these symbols we want to have available for representing manuscripts as editable text? Establish an inventory, a starting inventory, review it with experts who would help to find, certify the context of use, or say, no, that these two symbols that look different are really the same thing, just different typeface. So to review and certify an inventory, and then leverage something called the private use area, which is this kind of experimental sandbox that Unicode provides for working with extra symbols that are not in the standard. So the thought is to have an agreed upon way of using the private use area that's compatible from one font to the next, so we're not losing information. But this may not, the private use area may not always be a solution or the best solution. Excuse me, there's the font technology gives you multiple ways to solve this issue. And alternative means may be something to consider. So their input from font technologists would be helpful. And the Abyssinica people have been great in this way. Everything gets documented. It must be documented. It's essential. They get named. Everything gets named. We'd like to have a GES name as well as an English name, citations and so on. Maybe we're up to 300 pages now. I can readily say this. Growing beyond 500 pages. And then, yes, sort of, I guess, concluding now. So for this to work, if institutes agree or accept that they do want to capture this extra level of information that's implicit with the symbols, this graphical information, it's something we really, I'm sorry. Gosh. I'm trying to speak quickly, so I'm not taking too much time, but it's an area where we really have to work together. The numbers were brought, the many ways of doing numbers was brought to the Unicode Consortium for consideration as a starting point. And their response was, after a couple meetings, was no, the numeral forms with or without a bar, with this color, that color, it's not something we're going to encode. A different looking 5 is still a 5. And that's not, so it's out of scope for them. So if we want to have these sorts of things, and ligatures is out of scope for Unicode. If we do want to have these symbols, it's up to us. We're kind of on our own to do this as a community. We need to work together for it, so we can have intercommunication within the community, and we don't go back to difficulties of the 80s and 90s with different fonts that are incompatible. We want to head that problem off early, and this is why EMUFI is here in large part. There will be some symbols, some of these utility marks in particular, that are subject to standardization. For that, the thought is to work, once we've agreed upon what they are, know their context of use, we have them cited, work through the Ethiopian Standards Authority, to then get into the internal standard, ES 781, and then off to the Unicode Consortium. This is a experience building exercise for them. Anyway, to be involved, you need help with, I say, symbol naming, finding, building up the inventory. So when you come into something that you don't know how to transcribe or do not have at your disposal, communicate that. We can get it into the font. Sorry. And like some starting points to learn more about it. There is a mail list. Everything's in GitHub. Everything's free. It's all volunteer work. And if while there's the font available, there's not a keyboard. So with 500 extra symbols, how to type these would be an issue. It's another topic to get into. And let's see, I'll finish there. And so people I just wanted to thank who helped me out and really a lot in this past week with developing this presentation and giving me great feedback are shown here. So I'm going to pause and turn it back over to the moderator.
Wonderful. Thank you, Daniel. Very clear presentations of quite complicated subject matter. So thank you so much. And thanks to your contributors as well, and people on your supportive on this project. So I believe that we have Dr. Solomon and Dr. Marta back with us now. And we have about 10 minutes in our scheduled program to, I think, open it up for Q&A for Daniel or Solomon and Marta, and comments, questions. We have a few links being shared by Fasaha Atlau in the chat that people may be interested to look at. Fasaha is quite the expert in especially the historical work of getting the original set of Unicode or Ethiopic characters into Unicode, as well as he's done a lot of work on digitizing Ethiopian literature. And I'm not sure, I'm sure he has other areas of expertise too that he can share, and maybe even a potential presentation in the future that we'd love to be in touch with you about that, Fasaha. We also had a question from Yamane in the chat for Dr. Solomon and Dr. Marta, thanking them for the presentation and saying, as a developer, I'm interested to learn how I can incorporate your research in my applications. Please let me know what tools or resources are available to incorporate into our software applications. And sharing an email there.
Yeah, thank you, Isabel, and of course, Daniel. This was very helpful. One thing I wanted to, I think Solomon mentioned about Google Translate, and it's not quite accurate. And as one of the participants in the Google Translate team, we have seen significant amount of progress. And so I see the glass is really half full rather than half empty. And also, as far as speech to text, text to speech, I'm also involved with some young Ethiopian developers to do Amharic text to speech and speech to text, not in a synthesized voice, but an actual human voice. And so I would have loved to ask Dr. Solomon and Dr. Marta about how we can coordinate or how we can help. Also, I have a foundation here. We are funding Ethiopic development in Ethiopia, just the applications where people are doing it in Ethiopic. And so I have posted my email address. If you know somebody who wants to be funded, we have, you know, as modest as it is, we are trying to encourage young Ethiopians to develop apps, and I would stop there. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Fasaha. That's exciting to hear, and I hope people will note your email and be in touch with you. Dr. Solomon, Dr. Marta, are you able to, do you have the connection, the ability to respond to Yemane's question?
Yeah, not all actually. Just tried to, Marta was trying to write on the chat, but some of them are lost due to disconnections. And I hope we will have email conversations. I think, Isabel, you can just create a kind of group mail for this team to converse, and we can write to each other, or maybe find some other convenient connections. I think it is the time we are now here. The disconnection resulted in due to the weather, I think, because we have been using it for even online teaching, the same Wi-Fi device, which is more modestly was good, but not for today. But I hope we will have more conversations, more discussions with this team in the future. And to answer in short some of the questions that we have understood, we are really very glad to cooperate in developing all our research outputs to a product level, to the app or application level. Especially in the speech area, we have different models that could be used if they could be integrated in the different web-based applications. And we have developed one which we have not yet made it available for the community by the support of the previous MCIT, Ministry of Information Communication Technology. I hope we will manage to make it available for the public for the transcription purposes, and we have a better models this time even, and we can integrate those, and we can get help from any application developers, especially from this community. And the other thing is maybe we need to cooperate in having the different corpora that our students may use, and ourselves would like to have different corpora from which we can learn the different language features for the different application or development of different natural language processing tools. Maybe Marta, if you have anything to add.
Actually, you have already answered the question from Yemane, but we couldn't hear properly the question that came from Fasaha. Due to the instability of the internet connection, we couldn't hear the whole idea of what he has already said, and we didn't also get the texts in the chats, because when we are disconnected, it will restart again, and we don't have the history and so on. So I think as far as we heard, Fasaha was talking about Google Translate. Yes, it's improving, but what Solomon was trying to say. It's not to indicate as it's not perfect, and it's not due to the technical, I mean, the lack of technical capability of Google, but it's due to the difficulty of the language. Amharic is morphologically complex language, and the amount of corpus that we may have might not be enough to get perfect systems or perfect translation systems that will translate the Amharic texts to different languages perfectly. That is what Solomon wants us to try. Well, we try to say. And the other thing is about I couldn't hear the question properly. We couldn't hear the question properly, but it was about text-to-speech synthesis. Yes, we have also mentioned one from Abyssinica. They have online text-to-speech system, and we have tried it. And I mean, the synthesized voice is not, I mean, pleasing for Ethiopians. So the things that need to be germinated might not be correctly germinated, and so on. But it is, we are not blaming them, but we want to indicate that we need to work more. We need to exert more effort to make the things better.
Okay, good. Yeah, my question, we can do this offline. Essentially, I think Abyssinica's synthesized voice is not the best. We are actually using human voice. We are working on a studio in Ethiopia to do actually human voice. And so those are the kind of things we need to. So we can, instead of taking time here, contact me offline, and then we may be able to collaborate. I appreciate your work. And then Google also, yeah, that's what Google translates. Not perfect. It's not even perfect for English and other languages, but it's improving. So it's an artificial machine learning process, and so it's not a human doing it. So yes, our language is difficult, and nuances are difficult to capture by a computer. However, I think we are making good progress. We'll continue. So you have my email there. And so let's contact, and then we'll discuss this offline. And anything I can do to help, I'm here. Thanks.
Thanks, Faseha and Marta. I see a question in the chat from Daniel for Dr. Solomon and Dr. Marta. Has NLP for Ethiopian languages benefited from work in other Semitic languages like Arabic and Hebrew, or have you had to start from the beginning? And also, what are the main deficiencies in available corpus? That is, where is more corpus needed and of what nature? I think maybe we've lost them again, unfortunately. Does anyone have a question for Daniel or feedback for him?
Daniel, you asked how far are we from Alexa or Siri in Amharic. I know of some work. We are getting close, not quite there yet. And so that's possible. And yeah, we're benefiting with work from different engines. So again, I am just one of the many people who are working on this. So we are close.
Faseha, I have a question for you. I think you mentioned that you have a nonprofit or a foundation that offers some amount of funding for people working in these areas. What is the name of that? Or is it, maybe that was one of the links you shared. I haven't had a chance to look, but.
Okay, I haven't. It's an endowment. It's organized in Ethiopia. It's called the Fasaha Atlau Endowment. And Professor Masresha, who just left us, is one of the board members. And also in the US, we have a foundation called Fasaha Atlau Foundation, a 501c recognized. Essentially, helping Ethiopic is just one of the three main pillars. we are working other projects in single mothers in Ethiopia and children and so on. And the third pillar is work developing grants and for Ethiopic applications for those people who have award those, because the financial incentive is not there for people to develop in Ethiopic. So we're just trying to, it's not a lot of money. It's from private, it's a private foundation. So, but just trying to contribute whatever we can. And I'll say more once we get going on this.
Yeah, perfect. Wonderful. That's good to hear just a little bit. Well, good. Well, if we have maybe one more question or comment, we could close out with that. If anyone's been holding a thought, we'd love to hear it.
Daniel, I echo the sentiment of others, the amazing intricacy of the work you've done, leaning into a field that's just itself quite intricate and inscrutable in a lot of ways. But it seems like it holds a lot of promise maybe for being a diagnostic, either chronologically or certain schools of scribal practice, or maybe geographic locations where a musical tradition is especially studied. I could see some correlations like that developing down the road. Do you foresee things like that?
Oh, yes. I'm sure my audio's on. Yeah, yeah. I hope that's it. That would be a great utilization of this work. I think it makes having the symbols available makes it easier for analysis to happen. Computer-aided analysis. For a person to review 1,000 documents and look for common patterns, it's really too much to hope for. So having machines available to look for patterns, to look for commonality over time and space, it's something that could be used for that. And I'm interested in problems like with the change of symbols. The Millikit annotation is, if you look at two deguas written within the same 10-year time period or 20-year time period, you will see change. And maybe it's idiosyncratic to that scribe, to the Mesmeron who wrote it. But it may also reflect the schools they're in. I'm forgetting all the names, but like there's the Bethlehem group. There's maybe 3 or 4 schools of thought in this area, maybe become monasteries or such. But there's not, but how much inconsistency there may be and why it exists is something that can be reviewed. And there is change over time. The people I work with will tell me sometimes, well, that's an old Millikit. We don't use that anymore. We use this other one instead. And so there is evolution in that. And there's, I think, a lot to be explored. There's a Millikit that uses Amharic symbols. Why would you use Amharic, to annotate giz? For music is interesting. Even some of the terminology, Yizit, Cheret is not something you'd say in giz. Should be another a giz name. For some of these symbols that appear to have been lost, but there is there's definite evidence of loss and change over time that I think could be reviewed. That should be reviewed, and having the inventory of symbols you need to do that certainly helps, facilitates.
And Daniel, are you working with Pietro or others to assimilate those symbols into the Transcribus OCR algorithms? I presume that's another step.
Yeah, that's something that is a step. Wish more of those people were here today, but Transcribus is something I've only become aware of recently, and do want to give that a try to see how far it can go with this. I've not had the chance to try it out yet, but it looks promising. If you can train it and
very
establish a
promising
training set, then that's true. But once, say, if the OCR detects a certain letter shape, the question is then how do you store it so you can work with it later? And that was the gap that EMUFI tries to address. If you save it, into a file, what are you saving it with? That, for something that's not there in a font system. So anyway, that's that's the gap it can fill. And maybe by fall I'll be able to try it out on my own. But I'm hoping people who are working with transcribus presently would come forward and you know, I would work with them, and it goes along faster.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, based on the suggestion, yeah. Oh, so go ahead, Gabi.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Daniel, I want to go back to what you said earlier about stakeholders. The reason I'm mentioning that is, you know, that's something which kind of, you know, connects the first workshop and the other thing, because we thought also even in the first, there's a lot, the stakeholders, you know, especially those like the Ethiopian Writers Association, the, you know, the Language Academy, the Ethiopian Academy of Sciences. Actually, Dr. Masrasha was here earlier. But honestly, so how was your experience, at least on the digital field, to bring in what kind of response you got? And secondly, I mean, it's like as a comment, I think that it's some of the solution lies there, you know, without their contribution, it'll be very, very hard to come up with a style, and, you know, all that, you know, it has to be, a decision has to be made by the Language Academy in terms of the language and things like that. So how, I mean, what's the future for this workshop? Is that now the pandemic is over, you know, at least in the first, what I thought was like, you know, we have to go, or we have to mobilize resources and then do some kind of, you know, conference there with the stakeholders. If, you know, bringing them here to this, even though, you know, we have Zoom technology, but we saw today what kind of difficulties we have, but we need to have that conversation with them. So is that a solution? I know some funding, for example, about publishing in South Africa, which was funded by a British university, you know, who specialize in publishing. But can we mobilize this kind of resources, and then maybe can you foresee some kind of conference about digital production, preservation, you know, in general about production of knowledge in Ethiopia, with Ethiopic text at least.
Yes, absolutely, and that's so. You know, the experience. It has been really difficult to work with the people with the knowledge, the traditional knowledge, the good knowledge, or maybe not avid computer users. They don't check email every day. It's been very hard to work with those critical people virtually and remotely. So you really do have to be, I think, face to face. You know, meet them at their office, and that's critical to succeed at all in a way that's going to make everyone happy. So yeah, face to face is important, and we actually had a good go at this. We got to experience with this in 2018 with Isabel and Berhana Bieni, who's here, the Professor Berhana Bieni, with meeting the Ethiopian Writers Association, the Amharic Language School, and the Language Academy, visiting places like Berhana Salam Publishing House, and trying to meet other publishers. And absolutely, it is critical to meet them face to face. And they were open to it. They were open and receptive. And the blocker was not so much a financial side, but to really get the input from them. It was we realized we were a little bit empty-handed. We want to have this survey of questions, the whole list of 100 questions that need to be answered. So we had to organize that, and then doing that, it was still difficult to understand, because the way they think about, someone who's an Amharic literary expert thinks about the way they write very differently from the way a computer programmer thinks about it. It's different worlds that don't, you know, mesh. So finding out where we need to get this common language was an issue. And that experience led to the start of the style guide, where the thought is with the style guide would go back to them, Ethiopian Writers Association, and turn it over to them, you know, sort of make it their problem, and say, hey, you know, tell us this is wrong, you know, let us know, you know, gather your people, present this, and let us know what's, you know, what needs to be fixed. And when it is fixed, it's it's yours also. They can publish it in their own document and circulate it, and they can make a book out of it. We just need to, sometimes it's just knowing a yes or no answer to something. And I can't make these decisions. I can speculate from reading 10 books what it might be, but we need to hear the answers from them. But yeah, so it is time and effort is a factor. The experts are willing, and it's kind of the delay is, I'll say, on our side, and getting organized, getting materials ready to then host a conference and really record this information as it needs to be. So I hope that answers the question. Maybe there's some I missed.
No. I like your approach. Actually, the moment you said about, we did it instead of waiting for them, we did the side, and then you say like, so that was one of the considerations I had for the, after the first conference. We say like, actually, the late Professor Getachew started it about, how to say editor, between edition, the thing we talked about between edition and reprint, that the language does not make any distinction between publishing and everything, but he used it, and then maybe other authors will pick it up from there. It really shows in his publication that there was edition process, and expanded. He come up with a new term, which is other thing. So sometimes that's how you push it, I think, instead of waiting for standard, you just push everything, and then knowing the publishing practice in Ethiopia, sometimes they just follow one another, So yeah, I really like that that approach.
Okay, thanks. Right. Okay. Well, we'll definitely be in touch when we're ready for that next step, and appreciate all the support we can get.
Great. Well, thank you. I added to the chat there, Gabe, that I would be interested to learn about funding options. I'll put my email in the chat. Of course, Charles, I believe, probably has most people's email here on the call. And I also put up there, if you're interested, I mean, I can just add everyone, or I guess I don't have everyone's emails, but if you'd like to be part of ongoing conversation about some of these efforts, which I think would, we definitely, as Daniel emphasized, we need people's input, we need support in various different ways, be it because you're knowledgeable about, Ethiopian literature, manuscripts, or because you're on the ground in Addis and you can go and knock on doors. That's one of the things I do, because I'm not a tech person like Daniel, but I can pick up my phone and make a local phone call or go and say hello to people. So wherever you are in that, or you have an interest in whatever, we'd love to connect with more people. So if you're interested, put your email in the chat, and I can collect those, and we can create, I'm sure it won't be an everyday email chain or something, but once in a while, sharing some information and with the few people, these are not topics that have a wide, interest, right? But I think the 9 people I see in this room right now, and the few that keep popping in and out, are some of the few people who would probably really be able to make a difference in this area. So anyway, you can also follow up with me or Daniel, or with Charles after this event as well, Faseha as well. Some people have already shared their emails. So
actually, I suggest Chuck already has from the first conference. That was a little bit wider list, and for those who are not, maybe you can send it to Chuck now, and that way, it will grow and grow. There will be more people, and those who have attended in the past, maybe not today. So we can build on that.
Sure. Yeah. Excellent point. Excellent point. Yeah, and I would love, please do send me information on funding, because that could be something that I could potentially look into as, to help fuel our effort potentially. But I mean, my hat goes off to Daniel and, many other people in the room who have done so much without anyone funding them or anyone thanking them. Yeah, just very committed people here with us. So Well, I think on that note, thank you all so much for spending a couple hours plus of your time on a Saturday to join us. And it was just a real pleasure catching up with some of you, seeing your faces and learning from you. And we look forward to hopefully reconnecting in September. Charles, I don't know if you, Charles or Gabe, I don't know if you have anything you want to add about the next iteration of this series, but I think on my side, I'll say goodbye to everyone.
Yep. The details for September will be worked out. And thank you so much for moderating, Isabel. And thank you, Daniel and Solomon and Martha for your presentations. Really appreciate it.
Wonderful.
You
Please
all.
send me the recording, Charles.
Yes, I will. Yep.
Okay. Take care, everyone.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye.